All right, so this is a speaker meeting. Our speaker will share her experience, strength, and hope for approximately 45 minutes. We ask out of respect for our speaker to please remain seated until she has finished. It is my pleasure to introduce Ginger.
My name is Ginger, and I am an alcoholic. And I want to start off by thanking Marcus and Nan for asking me to speak. And I was taught a long time ago that if you're asked to do something in Alcoholics Anonymous, you just do it. And so I'm here, and I'm nervous, and I haven't shared in a really long time. But I want to start off with just saying that, Alcoholics Anonymous is my life, and you're my family. And I grew up in a pretty unloving, unfriendly kind of way of life. And when I made it to Alcoholics Anonymous, finally I found something that I never even knew was possible. And so, I'm going to share my story, and it's all my experience, my strength, and my hope. And there's some pieces of it that are pretty ugly, and but it has a happy ending as long as I keep doing what I'm doing right now, And so, I just want to start off with this one thing. I have my big book in front of me, and in the very front of my big book, my son gave me my big book, and it says, to the best mom I could ever ask for. Thank you for so much that you've done. And that's so important. I think I was destined to be an alcoholic well before I ever took my first drink. I'll start up by saying my sobriety date is December 12th, 2017. I've been coming to Alcoholics Anonymous since 1995. And, I was raised in a little town in the middle of Nevada. And I started off, in a home where my dad was an alcoholic and my mom she never made it to any type of Al-Anon, but she would have done well there. My dad was very abusive, and so I grew up in a domestic violence situation, and it was just trauma after trauma. And, I won't go into it too much, but I'll just give you one example of my childhood. And in this example, I was 10 years old, and, my dad had been gone for quite a while, and he came in, and he had come back, and he talked my mom into moving to, I grew up in a town of less than 5,000 people. We have one stoplight, 5 bars, and 1 grocery store. And we, there wasn't a lot to do there except for drink and do drugs. And so my dad talked my mom into coming home to his house where he had just bought a brand new mobile wide trailer, and it was up on some blocks, and we had these makeshift steps. And he'd bought a new pickup truck, and he promised my mom all of these wonderful things. And but he was an alcoholic, and I'm sure he meant all those things. But we went there, and the one thing that he forgot to do was get rid of his girlfriend. And so we had just gotten there, and my sister and I, we didn't have any furniture yet. We're sleeping on a couch in the living room. And about midnight, I don't really know. I know it was the middle of the night. I was 10 years old, right? And we're now in a town of 200 people. And we get a knock on the door at midnight or so, and it's some really drunk lady asking for my dad. And my mom answers the door, and she says he's in bed, and slams the door. And this lady goes out to the edge of our property in her car, and she throws her car in drive, and she slams right into our house where my sister and I were, and she was trying to drive through our house. So my sister and I are thrown across the living room, and I'm 10, my sister is 6, and my mom goes out on the makeshift steps with a loaded shotgun, and she's aiming the shotgun in the lady's window, and the lady's coming to hit our house again. My mom loses her nerve, runs back in the house. She's dialing 911, and there is no 911 in this town that we lived in at that time. And so now my dad is awake, and he's drunk, and he goes running out completely naked into our yard, and he's running, yelling at this lady, and this lady now tries to run over my dad, and he jumps in the back of the new pickup truck, and she hits the new pickup truck. So within a matter of 5 minutes, our home is destroyed, the car is destroyed, and my mom's marriage is destroyed, and my mom and dad are now gone. And that's just one little thing in my childhood growing up. My dad used to run around with a chainsaw, going to cut my brother in half. I had an older brother and a younger sister, And, we just had trauma after trauma, and those things, I don't know, there's a lot of us that grew up like that, and those things, for me, are being healed through Alcoholics Anonymous. I moved out when I was 15 years old, and I took my first drink. I always drank as a kid. I don't know when I really took my first drink. It's just what we did. We drank in my family. I don't know how old I was when I took my first drink, but the first time I set out to get drunk, I can tell you, I just turned 14 years old. My mom sent me to Colorado. I was outside of Denver in Fort Collins, Colorado. My aunt thought it was a good idea to leave me at 14 and my 16-year-old cousin home alone for the weekend. And so we scored some weed, we got some acid, and we bought some Boone's Farm Strawberry Hill. And so, I freaking smoked pot, did acid, and got drunk, and had sex, and I've never been the same since. It went downhill. It has never been the same. It was like a perpetual just in-motion train going out of control. And so I came back from that summer, and I was ready to rock. I was no longer this little girl. I'll tell you, I grew up so poor. My mom would leave my dad, and we would have to, put sheets up in our house and live by a fire, and, it sucked, and I was made fun of at school, and my home life was abusive, and my teachers were bullies, and the kids used to beat me up, and I had to wear shitty clothes, and I just had no self-worth. Until I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I, so I'm on this locomotive. I'm already on probation, and I'm running away, and I'm doing all this stuff, and I move out at 15 years old, and so I'm living out on my own, and I have this little job at Safeway, and I have this little apartment with some girl, and my probation officer finds out that I don't live at home anymore. And she tells me that I have to either move home or I'm going to get sent away. So I turned 16 and I got married. And so my mom signed the papers, and so now I'm emancipated and I'm a legal adult. And so we moved from this little tiny town in Nevada, and we moved outside of Reno. And I can remember even at that age, I thought, I can't drink or use. Because by that time, we used to call it crank. It's called meth now, but we called it crank back then. And I was already, hell on wheels. And, so I can remember being that young at 16 years old and moving to Carson City, Nevada with my first husband. I have 4 of them. So, I can remember I was there just a couple of weeks, and I was at this 7-Eleven, and I was filling up my big gulp, and there was a girl standing next to me, and I go, "Where's the party?" And I went over to her house, and within 2 weeks, I was strung out for my first time, and I stayed that way, for a few years, and of course, that marriage lasted about 4 months for me, and I was out on my own, though, and I was out there just doing what I do. And then, I met the man of my dreams. Shortly after that, I was 17 years old, and, he had just done the whole 80s in Folsom and San Quentin, and he was hot, he drove a big truck, and, he sold drugs, and he was fun. And so we got together, and I have my son through him, and I would spend the next couple of years with him, and while I was 18 years old, I ended up pregnant with my son, and I had my son at 19, and, I just don't suggest dating the drug dealer. He comes over to my house. I'm just a kid, right? I'm 17 years old, and he comes over to my house. We'd been seeing each other a few weeks, and he has this brand new baby in a car seat. And I'm like, wow, that's weird. What's that, So apparently the mom, he had 2 women pregnant at the same time, and they're 3 months apart, and the mom had, delivered the baby, and she had gone straight to prison. And so he had this brand new baby, and so I thought, wow, I could be a mom, So at the age of 19, I have a brand new baby, a 15-month-old and an 18-month-old. And I'm thinking, this is the first time I've ever had anybody love me. I had a family, I really loved this man. And we had this little family, as dysfunctional as it was. I had a family and I had some purpose in my life. And, but I couldn't quit using. I couldn't quit using, and I was hiding it, and I was drinking, and there was never be a time where you wouldn't see me doing, meth and drinking Jack Daniels. And I never saw it as my problem, and he relapsed, and I was so innocent, and he started doing heroin because that was his deal, and he would come home and he would nod out at the table, and I was like, babe, maybe you shouldn't smoke so much weed, and I'm opposite. I'm all ready to go all the time, and so for the next year of my life, I would spend trying to get him into a rehab. And I can remember sitting in detox after detox, trying to get him a bed and trying to talk him into being clean and sober, because we needed him. And I should have been laying down myself, At the end of that year, at that relationship, he had done 3 armed robberies and in a high-speed chase, little hostage situation, and he never came home. And so I lost my stepkids, and here I was, 19 years old, and I had a huge drug problem. I had no job skills, and I had no education. Before I got sober, the first time I got sober, my last grade completed was 8th grade, and I didn't know what to do, and I ended up in some really bad situations. Some such bad situations that's eventually what got me sober the first time. Relapse is absolutely a part of my story, and I never thought it would be. I ended up in a bad situation. I came to visit my mom, who's very dysfunctional, and I had every intention on staying clean and sober. I had been living down in LA now, and I was running with some pretty weird things going on, and I came up, and I had every intention on staying clean and sober. And the first day I was there, one night passed, and I was drunk, and I was out scoring, and I came home, and I asked my mom to help me get into rehab, and I was really bad off. And she didn't understand what was happening in my life, and she started accusing me of being a junkie and all of this stuff. And I slapped her in her face, and I told her I needed to go talk to a pastor. And so I hopped in her truck and I drove down to this church, and I never made it to talk to a pastor. And I came back, and there was cops there. And when I waited for the cops to leave, and I coasted down the alley, and I jumped over the fence and jumped through a window, and all that becomes pertinent because it becomes a felony. But so I ended up freaking tearing up a police report, and I went into the bedroom and I grabbed a loaded shotgun. At that moment, everybody dispersed because they thought I was going to shoot them, and really I just couldn't do this anymore. I was tired. I had so many deals to settle, and just so much anger and so much resentment. And I put that shotgun in front of my face, and I pulled the trigger. And I can tell you, I looked down at my son, who happens, to be clean and sober also now, and I had my son, and they let me have my stepson, and my kids were screaming, "Mommy," and I looked down and I said, "Mommy's got to go," and all I wanted was help. I wanted to quit running with the people I was running with, and I knew I was going to die. And the first thing I did, though, is I ran. I was trying to break into some houses and call those people that I didn't want anything to do with, because I don't have a choice once I put that stuff in my body. I have no more choice. I'm a subject to whatever I have to do to get more. It doesn't matter what it is. For some reason, I had a moment of clarity, and I jumped over the fence. And there was a bunch of cops looking at the vehicle that I'd left in the alley. And I was drunk. And so I throw my hands up in the air. I start walking towards the rookie cop that I still know. And he grabs his gun, and he's aiming it at me, and he tells me to identify myself, but I'm a little too drunk to really understand what he's saying, so I'm just screaming at him that I'm the one you're looking for. I can only imagine what my mom's neighbors must have been thinking that day. Like, do we hide or do we watch this shit go down? Like, so anyways, he's screaming at me to identify myself, and I keep repeating myself that I'm the one you're looking for. And he tells me, get down on the ground, get down on the ground. And it's the only place in the alley where people throw dog poop over their fence. So I'm like, I can't, but at that moment, it didn't matter. It was out of my control, and another cop tackled me to the ground. And so I ended up in jail. And it was the first time in a really long time that I felt safe. I'd been to jail quite a few times before that for stupid stuff. But this time I needed to be there. Like I was going to hurt people, and people were going to hurt me. And so I'll tell you that I was in there, and I thought that I would never drink or use again. And this was it, right? And 2 weeks later, I get bailed out. And I had a huge bail. They really trumped up a lot of stuff. And I get bailed out. And I can't even make it a half a mile to my mom's house, and I'm drunk. And I go and I pick up my little boy, and I end up dropping him, and the cops are called again. And so I end up, facing all this stuff. And I used to think, if I didn't have bad luck, I'd have no luck at all. And, I ended up going to court for all of that stuff. And they wanted me to do 2 years in prison. And I really thought that that's what I was going to do. I thought I was going to go to prison for 2 years, and I was completely prepared to do that. And during that sentencing, the judge, he told me he had reviewed this case at lunch, and that he thought his verdict would be different, but he gave me 3 years probation, drug and alcohol counseling, and I had to do Alcoholics Anonymous. And that's the part where I thought I got screwed. But, like, really? Have you been there? But so I start doing Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm in this little town now. I'm stuck in this little town of less than 5,000 people doing AA with these grungy old men. And I just couldn't get it. I did not understand what was happening, and I'm tending bar, and I'm bartending. I live behind the bar, and I don't know what the problem is, right? And but this is the problem, is that when I wasn't tending bar, I was drinking. And I had a little boy, and that little boy would have to suffer because of my drinking. Because I would put a baby monitor up so that I could hear him while I was drinking at the bar. And he would cry, and that's how I'd know he was okay. And that's why when I get something written in my book, it's an absolute miracle that it's from my son that says that I'm the best mom ever, and to thank me for the things that I've done. I came to Alcoholics Anonymous for a couple of years, and I brought in my court card, and I hated everything you guys had to say. But then one day this lady walked in, and her name was Judy, and I was in Reno, Nevada at this time. And she walked in, and I judged her from head to toe. She looked really nice. She had on nice clothes. She had on nice jewelry, and her makeup was on, and I was in dirty sweats and raggedy-ass hair. And my life sucked. And it was just a matter of time before my P.O. busted me, and all hell broke loose again, And so I listened to what she had to say after judging her. She shared, and she said that, she only had 6 months of sobriety, and she used to be a crack whore. She lost all 4 of her kids, and now she's sober 6 months, and she has all 4 of her kids back. And I just thought, wow, that's crazy that somebody like that could go from there to here, to look at her now. And that lady saved my life, because every time you guys talked about God, my meeting ended. And if you have a problem with God, I suggest you keep coming back and you don't leave 5 minutes before the miracle happens, because there is some amazing stuff here, and if you have a prejudice against God, you need to drop it. It's a whole new God. And so, you say it, mofo. So, because that's the whole purpose of this program, is to have a spiritual awakening and to have a conscious contact with a power greater than yourself. I have been going to church on and off my entire life. When I was a little girl, I used to get myself up and go all by myself, and the old ladies used to brush my hair because I knew that at my young age that the family I was living in, there had to be something better. I don't know why. I believe in God just like a little kid. Yeah, I won't argue God. I just don't. But I never thought that I was good enough. I always had this weird, I'm just not good enough. And when I go to church and I try to do a ladies' Bible study and they find out I've been married 4 times, I'm a drunk and an addict and like all this stuff, I usually don't fit in. So I'm glad you guys are here, But anyways, this lady, she came over one day and she told me that the only thing that she could do for me is to have me pray because I was having a hard time and I didn't know if I was going to stay sober. And she would meet me at a 5 o'clock meeting or 5:30 meeting. And I told her that I had a problem with God. And she told me, then I suggest you pray to my God. And I literally had to start off like that, dear Judy's God. And now that's my God. And so if you have a problem with God, you can borrow mine tonight. And you can just say, dear Ginger's God. Because my God, you're going to hear some walls crashing down because he comes running to you. You don't have to find God. He's already here. So anyways, I got sober February 19th, 1997, and I stayed sober until 2010. And I loved Alcoholics Anonymous. I fell in love with this program, and I fell in love with you. And then I moved. And I made so many bad choices in Alcoholics Anonymous. I never got the spiritual maturity that it takes to stay sober on a daily basis. And so I ran a lot of muck. I was in a ton of service. And when I shared, you would think like, man, she's got her shit together. And I was just so fearful still. You guys told me fake it till you make it. And that was fine as long as I lived where I lived because you guys helped me. But then I moved out here to Arizona. And I moved to Sedona. And I hated their meetings. They didn't do them right. That's not the way we do them back home. You guys are doing it all wrong. And so I really struggled. And I didn't get myself immersed in the fellowship like I know I need to be because I have to live in Alcoholics Anonymous and I have to just visit the world. So after, 13 years of sobriety, I relapsed. And I thought that I was controlling my drinking for about 4 years. Oh, because I'd met another him. And he was awesome, and he was normal, and he was nice, and he didn't yell at me, and and he looked nice, and I wasn't, because I got away from the fellowship. And when I am sober and I'm not seeking God and I don't have a spiritual condition that's going to keep my sobriety going, I am selfish, I'm self-centered, I'm mean, I'm jealous, I'm filled with anxiety and fear, and it's just as if I was drinking. So with that being said, I drank for about 4 years, and then we divorced. And in that 4 years, I became a nurse, and then he left when I was in nurse practitioner school. And I held it together, But then I don't know, something happened where I just couldn't hold it together anymore. And so I began drinking on a daily basis, and for the next few years, I wouldn't be able to draw a sober breath. In the meantime, I had a child when I moved out here also, and that little boy used to go to the bar with me. I'm a nurse, and I get off of work, and I can't even make it home without stopping at the bar with my kid and staying there till 11 o'clock at night. And God bless those bars that let us drink with our kids, huh? Like, where would we be? Where would they have been? Like, so anyways, I would stay at the bar and drink, and then I'd have those nights where, I'm just drinking vodka on my patio with my phone and just crying, and I hadn't talked to my family in years, and now I'm divorced, and I only have my 2 boys. One of them's strung out, and one of them's too little to deal with me. And so I I end up meeting another him, and this time I imported him from Canada, and so he loved my bad behavior, and so I could drink as much as I wanted and act as bad as I wanted, and so I did. And he moved out here, and 2 days after he got here, I woke up with the worst headache of my entire life, and I went on with that for about 4 months, and I was misdiagnosed, and I had dissecting brain aneurysm. Most people don't live with that. And so I ended up having to undergo 2 brain surgeries, and that was 4 years ago. And you would think that I could get sober to do that, and I couldn't. I'm standing there with 20 staples down my freaking head. I can barely open my mouth. I can't stand on my own. And my husband, the Canadian that I imported, he has to bathe me. And I'm waking up and drinking gin and tonics. And I was so scared, but I had no choice in the matter, and I just stayed drinking. So about a year after my brain surgeries, I ended up kicking him out, and because he was just as bad of a drunk as I, and 2 months later, I got sober. I can tell you that in this program, there's a few people, and one of them's here tonight, that I never quit calling when I was drunk. Unfortunately, it was around 3 o'clock in the morning, and he never gave up on me, he never judged me. And on December 1st, 2017, I called him and I said, I can't do this anymore. And he said, you know where to go. And I couldn't go that day. It was a little too rough. But I went the next day. And I haven't quit coming to Alcoholics Anonymous since. I'm going to share a few things that, coming back in after relapsing and being gone that long, I thought that I knew things. And what I found out is I didn't, or that wouldn't have happened. What I've learned, especially I stayed kind of dry. When I first got sober, I'm super blessed. I moved out of my house and into my camp trailer, and I rented out my house so that I didn't have to be that responsible, right? And I traveled around the country, and I'd never pulled a trailer before, and my first trip was 9,000 miles, and I went around the country, and I went to different meetings, and I drugged my little boy with me, and during that time period, my oldest son he had been busted and was looking at some serious time in prison, and my whole world was just really crashing down in sobriety. I couldn't breathe. And so I took off, and I thought for 9,000 miles over a couple months. And I hit different meetings, and I came back, and I kept moving around, and I couldn't settle down. And I couldn't figure out why I couldn't feel the sunlight of the Spirit. And it was probably about 9 months ago that I realized that, I just have to grow where I'm planted. I've been running from myself for a really long time. I'm going to be 47 in a couple months, and I have never sat with myself long enough to even know who I am. And I'll tell you, in the last few months, I have never worked the steps harder than I am right now. I'm scared. I know that relapse has been a part of my story, and I don't want it to be again. I have never worked a more thorough inventory in my entire life, and I didn't realize, and it scares me to know how delusional I am. One of the husbands that I forgot to mention was husband number 3. He was like the president of an outlaw motorcycle gang, and I was clean and sober marrying him. And so it kind of scares me that I could be so delusional even in sobriety. So unless I put God first and me second, I'm going to stay in delusion, right? And I don't know if you guys ever use this little red book, but man, it's freaking awesome, right? It's so detailed on the steps and what they mean and how they work out for you. And there's some things, I've been on a medication for the last 11 years, and I just dumped it in February. 11 years of this medication that I thought I cannot stop because now I've had these brain surgeries too. But on the day that I've been praying about it. I've been, kind of half-assing it this whole time. And in February, one day, we had somebody in our fellowship pass away. And it was, at the time, I had no idea why she had died or anything, but I speculated and I thought, I might die too. And I poured that down because on that same day, I read this in this little red book, because I've had sponsor after sponsor tell me that they didn't know, whatever, whether or not I should be taking a certain medication. And it says in here, occasionally some of us have resorted to drugs to give physical comfort or to induce sleep. This practice is out for all alcoholics, except those rare cases where an ethical medical practitioner, skilled in the treatment of alcoholism, prescribes and supervises such treatment. And it goes on, and it says that they prevent honesty and realism. And that's why I couldn't feel the sunlight of the Spirit. I couldn't do it, no matter how much I wanted to, because something blocked it, right? And so it says our 24-hour program of AA living demands faith in a power greater than ourselves, so we must surrender self-will and entirely eliminate the use of these drugs. I'm not saying to anybody to eliminate the use of the drugs, but what I will tell you is that my medical practitioner was not skilled in what she was prescribing me, nor was I completely honest. And I can tell you that since that's happened, my spiritual life has grown by leaps and bounds. I now feel the sunlight of the Spirit. I feel like I am walking in unity with you guys. I feel like I have no shame and nothing to hide. My life is an open book, and if my purse falls open, I don't have to worry about what you see in it. So I know that for me, I have to remain completely clean and sober, no mind-altering substances. Pot's legal, and it's not for me. Alcohol's legal, and it's not for me, right? I can be prescribed whatever, but unless I'm not being honest, I'm going to go back out. And for me, that just means so much tragedy. I've cried buckets of tears until I got here, and now those buckets are different. I have some friends on Zoom too. Hi, Cornelius. He's waiting for that. So there's people in Maine. I have this group of people that, we get together and we hang out and we laugh so hard sometimes. My son is here tonight and he's clean and sober, and this program has not just saved me, but it's saved my son. I'll tell you, 3 years ago, I just used to put, cases of water and protein bars out on his doorstep just to make sure he had something to eat and some water. And I used to come into Alcoholics Anonymous and I used to cry. And I used to just know that I was going to have to identify my son's body. And then, and you guys taught me how to do things differently. On the night that he had gotten kicked out of a place and he wanted to come home, I said no. And I laid on my floor in my bathroom and I cried in fetal position, crying to God to please save my son. And I've never prayed more hard or more honestly. And and I just feel like you guys, because I knew I couldn't save him, but you guys could, and you guys did. You guys have saved me, you've saved my son, and you've got a seat for my little one if he ends up here, which, I hope he can have a happy and productive life without going through all the pain. I'm going to read one more thing, because this is pretty important to me, because I just know that I never grew, right? And so it says that the purpose of taking moral inventory is to expose the noxious character traits of our alcoholic personalities and to eliminate them from the new personalities. That's kind of where I went wrong, right? I didn't really get rid of things. And it says that half measures avail us nothing. I've heard that since 1995. Half measures avail us nothing. So half equals zero. Right? That's crazy to me that I never really caught on to that. But, and it says that we have to take on new personalities, right? And to know that we gauge AA personalities by AA maturity. And that is evidenced in such qualities as strength and understanding from a power greater than ourselves, the surrender of self-centeredness, honesty, sincerity, practice of the 12 steps, creative thoughts, positive action, admitting wrongs and making amends, service to others, and the example of a happy, sober life. You know, that's what I want. I don't want to waste my time here. If I'm just coming here just to not drink and I'm white knuckling it because I want to drink, I don't need this. I want something way more. I want to feel that connection that I feel once in a while with God. I want to be a part of your group because you guys are my tribe. Like I said, I can't go to the Bible study, right? I just don't fit in there. But I do fit in here, you know, and I have come, you know, when I was a kid, I was living on the streets, and you do everything that you have to do to live down there. And somehow through Alcoholics Anonymous, I was able to grow up, and I threw it away. And this time I'm hanging on, and it's an honor to be a part of Alcoholics Anonymous. You know what I mean? Like, I am so grateful. On the day that I shot off that gun, I am so grateful that I didn't kill myself, because I would have killed a complete stranger, somebody I had no idea that I was even going to become. You know, I have a cool life today. And I know my son's probably going to yell that I talk about him too much, but, you know, I hang out with my son just about daily. You know, I'll tell you, like, even just a year ago, we couldn't even be in the same room. And now we're very close, you know, and my youngest, I'm very close with my kid. I'm so blessed to be a part of Alcoholics Anonymous. And thanks for letting me share.
Let's thank Ginger one more time.